It is Thursday, August 28th, and brand new GDP and inflation numbers released this morning. The U.S., it turns out, growing at its fastest pace in years. Also, President Trump dropping the hammer on these blue city and state leaders across the country, specifically on Gavin Newsom, on J.B. Pritzker, both of whom copying Trump's tough on crime policies. You can't make this up. We'll show you that. And the Trump effect reaching across borders now, across the southern border, the Mexican government in a full-blown constitutional crisis over allowing the U.S. to help eradicate the cartels. Should they allow U.S. military interventionism into their country to help destroy the cartels, the drug cartels, once and for all? We'll show you what went down yesterday and more stories as well from around the country. So the U.S. economy growing even faster than expected in the second quarter. Newly revised numbers just released show gross domestic product rose at a 3.3% annualized pace in the April through June period. Originally, they thought it was 3%. That was the original estimate, jumping up to 3.3%. On top of that, consumer spending still up, even with Trump's tariffs, and headline inflation falling even further to 2%. The PCE price index for inflation edging lower to a flat 2%, exactly where the Fed wants it, which means it's getting harder and harder for them not to cut rates.
3% was our last look. It now jumps up to 3.3%. But from a comp basis, that would still be the best quarter since September of 23, third quarter of 23. Consumption, always important in a consumption economy. It remains strong. 1.4 our first look, 1.6 our modified look. 1.6 will be the best consumption since the last quarter of 24, when it was well above. It was at 4%. Now, the pricing index, maybe this has more relevance considering all the issues of the day the press is on with the Fed. Well, it remains at 2%. No changes there.
Meanwhile, President Trump continuing with his push to make America safe again, giving parts of the country a taste of law and order. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt sending a strong message this morning to Americans living in Democrat cities, saying decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, hurt, or murdered even. Your leaders are lying and have been failing you for decades. Watch.
So while liberal Democrats across the country continue to double down on their failed soft on crime approach, the American people, including local D.C. leadership, business owners, and residents, are rallying behind President Trump's crime crackdown. According to new polling, 81% of Americans say crime is a major problem in large cities across the country. And a clear majority of Americans believe the president's actions are justified and necessary to reduce crime in these cities. Indu Bhatia, who runs a liquor store a half mile from the White House here just down the street, is one of those Americans who are grateful for President Trump's public safety push. Indu recently told the New York Post that her store was robbed so many times that they had to spend exorbitant sums of money on security, jeopardizing her family's financial future. But thanks to President Trump's strong action, Indu said, quote, "All of my employees, including me, we feel much safer, and even our customers feel really happy when they walk into our store." And just yesterday, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser credited President Trump for surging federal law enforcement personnel and said neighborhoods, quote, "feel and are much safer." We thank Mayor Bowser for her cooperation and her willingness to help us make D.C. safe and beautiful. This entire effort has vindicated what President Trump and law and order advocates have been saying for years, and this is our message to Americans in Democrat-run cities nationwide. Decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, raped, or murdered. Your leaders are lying to you, and they have been failing you for decades. The President Trump approach of upholding law and order by letting our brave men and women in blue actually do their jobs to aggressively fight crime works. In just a few weeks, President Trump has done more for D.C. residents than Democrats did in 50 years. And this can be replicated in other crime-ridden cities across the nation. As President Trump has said, all of these elected officials in charge have to do is pick up the phone and ask for the president and the federal government's help. President Trump doesn't care if they are a Republican or a Democrat leader. He wants Americans to be safe and for every law-abiding American citizen across the country to be able to thrive in their city and in their community.
Trump's eyeing multiple blue cities, Chicago, L.A., and Baltimore to start with. Writing on Truth Social this morning, Governor Pritzker had 6 murders in Chicago this weekend. 20 people were shot, but he doesn't want to ask me for help. Can this be possible? The people are desperate for me to stop the crime, something the Democrats aren't capable of doing. Stay tuned. Even the Democrat Trump-hating mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, admitting that Trump has effectively made D.C., made her city, one of the safest cities in the country, all in a matter of a couple weeks, admitting this publicly with facts, saying the difference between this 20-day period after Trump's federal surge and last year during that same 20-day period represents an 87% reduction in carjackings. 87%. Roll the tape.
And we greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city. The most significant thing that we are highlighting today is the area of crime that was most troubling for us in 2023. Now, we have driven it down over the last years, but and I'm going to get my glasses so I can make sure I can see it correctly. But for carjackings, the difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings in Washington, D.C. We know that when carjackings go down, when the use of gun goes down, when homicide or robbery go down, neighborhoods feel safer and are safer. So this surge has been important to us for that reason.
Democrats realizing this is something their constituents want. They want safety. They want to feel safe walking down the street. They see their internal polling. They see it now as a major vulnerability. So much so, for the first time in nearly 15 years, Gavin Newsom changing his crime policy. You can't make this up. Announcing this morning he's going to be surging his own law enforcement to address crime statewide in California, trying to get ahead of President Trump deploying the National Guard. Watch this.
Red states that you say are higher, and at the same time, we're here because you're surging law enforcement across the state. So, do you believe that crime is a problem in California or not?
Well, sort of a curious question. I made the entire point that crime's an issue and we want to tackle it, and we continue to do more in that space. And we announced and highlighted some of the expansion. What is not contradictory, respectfully, is that we're doing it in partnership with our local communities. We did it in partnership with the Biden administration prior. We're not talking about the nationalization, the militarization of the Guard and militarizing United States cities. So quite the contrary.
Trump also calling out Maryland's Governor Wes Moore for failing to clean up his state and refusing Trump's help to make Baltimore safe again. This is the same Wes Moore who was just caught lying about receiving the Bronze Star for his military service, and now just moments ago changing his tune as well a little bit, saying he would absolutely welcome federal support to help clean up Baltimore. Watch.
Governor, I appreciate the investment, but it would just seem to me, if despite that investment, Baltimore still ranks third in the nation in violent crime rate per capita in the nation, that you would welcome in the President of the United States help if crime in Maryland. And as to the point of partisan politics, it's simply the truth. The truth isn't partisan. And the truth is most of the major cities in the United States are run by Democrat governors, and they're also the highest rate crime cities in the country. I'm on limited time, and I want to give you a chance to address something,
I would
though, Governor,
absolutely
President
welcome
Trump brought
federal
it up.
support.
Apparently, there we go. you would welcome federal support. That's wonderful to hear.
I would absolutely
I'm sure the
welcome
president
federal
will be happy
support.
to hear that.
But I also know what federal support is going to be necessary and required. It's the reason that I've said we would love to have additional support for license plate readers, things that we know can actually stop crimes as they are happening and making sure that people are brought to justice.
President Trump acting as a forcing function around the country, around the world even, to solve problem after problem. That's what he's doing, cleaning this place up, even reaching down south of the border into Mexico. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the last few weeks, putting a lot of pressure on Mexico to allow U.S. military intervention to eradicate the cartels. Yesterday, a fistfight even breaking out between Mexican senators in their Senate chambers. Imagine that happened in the States, in our Senate, all over whether they should accept Trump's offer to send U.S. troops. We reported a few days ago that Mexican senator who was speaking out against her president's political party, the Moreno Party, which has direct ties to the drug cartels. Look, I'm confident Trump will be doing this. We will see some sort of military intervention in Latin America to root the cartels out. It's just a question of when. He doesn't want to create some diplomatic or international incident. He wants them to ask for his help. Let me know if you agree with this. The opposite approach, mind you, the Biden administration's approach or policy was to send U.S. aid, send tax dollars to these Latin American countries to help educate the youth why it's a bad idea to join and work with the cartels. Yeah, that didn't work so well. It's not going to work going forward. Meanwhile, back stateside, Secretary of Health Bobby Kennedy telling Fox this morning that the NIH is studying SSRI drugs and their potential link to violence in the wake of yet another mass shooting. The attack committed, as we know, in a church, a Catholic church. This person saying they regretted transitioning and clearly going through some severe mental health crisis. RFK Jr. making the point that giving SSRIs to people who may already have a mental illness could exacerbate the problem, saying there could be a direct connection. And for the first time, he says, HHS is willing to look into it. Watch.
And we're still trying to get a lot of answers to a ton of questions. But the one thing is clear. You are dealing with a person who's trans, that was transitioning. Are you going to be examining at all some of the drugs that are used in order to make that transition happening, to see if it plays a role? Because we also know there was a trans shooter in the Tennessee situation.
Yeah, we are doing those kind of studies now at NIH. We're launching studies on the potential contribution of some of the SSRI drugs and some of the other psychiatric drugs that might be contributing to violence. You know, many of them on there had black box warnings that warn of suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation. So we can't exclude those as a culprit, and those are the kind of studies that we're doing.
So I've never seen that medicine, but you're saying that if you get it, some of the side effects could be homicide, suicide?
Well, there are black box warnings on some of these psychiatric drugs that warn about, in their clinical trials, that they saw suicidal and homicidal ideation. So, you know, we are going into that with an open mind.
This coming as America's churches are under attack. In the last year alone, there's been 415 hostile incidents against U.S. churches, a 730% jump since 2018 alone. Churches, places of refuge and sanctuary, and for whatever crazy reason are becoming deliberately chosen targets. The FBI has been warning about this, that in 2023 there was nearly one attack every single day in a U.S. church.
A growing problem in the United States with the number of hostile attacks against Christians skyrocketing. Just last year, there were 415 incidents, which is a 730% increase just since 2018.
Let me know what you think about this. Is there a war on faith and church in this country? Some would say it's been happening for years. Let me know what you think. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.